Welcome to the Golden Moment podcast. My name's Mijo Biscan. In this episode, I had a really great conversation with my friend Steve Angel. He indeed is an angel. He kind of floated into my life on an island in Malaysia when I was doing a very intensive, amazing, crazy personal development workshop called Enlightened Warrior Training Camp. It was such a phenomenal experience, and I met him on the first day and we just connected. We've stayed in touch. He's in the music industry in a way. He creates events and puts on events. So this conversation straddled a number of different topics that this podcast is about. So we talked about music, the arts, creativity, creative people. We talked about the importance of putting on an event and just what that means and how Steve thinks about that. We also talked about personal development, knowing that this term for some people has a real stigma around it, like it's the weird Tony Robbins version of personal development. But yeah, we went into talking about the importance of growing as a human being. And, so it was a really great conversation. Another person I really love talking to, always get something from having a conversation with Steve. So here it is, without further delay, my conversation with Stephen Angel. Here we are in the podcast with Steve Angel. Welcome, man.
Thank you, mate. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, this is exciting. I've been wanting, to talk to you more deeply about a few different things that you do. So I think you're a really interesting guest. We can take this in lots of directions. So I will have introduced you a little bit of your background, but maybe just tell us a little bit about what you've done and where you're at now and what you're working on, what you're focusing on.
Yeah. Well, like many people, my journey where I am right now, I'm a spiritual counsellor. I work with people on their values, and I help them through sort of difficult challenges in their life from a spiritual perspective. I am also a fairly successful event producer as well, which I have been for 15 years. And in that time, I've also been a booking agent for entertainers, especially in the event space. So it's been quite varied. And then prior to that, I have run my own business. I worked in New York and in Osaka. I have studied marketing, and I have done so much personal development and reflection in my life, which is how we actually met too.
Yeah, that's right.
Mio, didn't we? We met in the jungles of Malaysia doing crazy Enlightened Warrior, which was amazing stuff. And I remember that. And I've always been willing to just keep pushing the boundaries, and not always a willing participant, but always knowing that I needed to do that. I always needed to do that. And there's a sense of creativity that I've always had since I was a child, about wanting to understand how things work and how I can make things and how I can create. So it's always been a thread that's been through my entire life. With all the careers, as varied as they are, there's an element of creativity in all of them that I can see now in hindsight, but not at the time.
Yeah, there's so many strings to your bow. You've engaged with and learned so many different skills. And I'm sure you're kind of seeing how those things continue to converge, or they come together, those skills you learnt years ago, kind of support everything you do moving forward.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. So how did you initially get into event management? What drew you to events? Did it start as, well, you just tell us. Yeah.
Well, I never planned on being in events. It was one of those things where I had just been running my own company for the last, 10 years. And I was running it with my wife. So I started it when I was in my early 20s. And then probably in my mid 30s, it changed a lot. And the business, just for the listeners to understand, it was in beauty care products, homeware products, and we were designing and manufacturing in Australia, and we're selling them all around the country as well as overseas. And we're in department stores in America and in Europe and spas and so forth. And we're really proud of what we're doing because we were making it all here in Australia. It was very early on in the whole natural beauty space, which is now sort of become a standard expectation from consumers that everything have, a high level of natural content and organic ingredients. We were doing this very long time ago, about 20 years now.
Wow.
But the space started to change. Manufacturing in Australia started to get more and more expensive, and we will find they were being pushed out by sort of Chinese imports and the Australian dollar. And I'd really had enough by that stage. I'd had enough. I felt like I had expressed myself as much as I could within that space. And what was required of me was to start to do things I wasn't willing to do, which was to take manufacturing overseas, no longer employ the people that I was employing. And I was employing a lot of people who were, say, on disability pensions or their unemployment pensions, people who probably were struggling to get a gig, struggling to work, but I wanted to employ them in any way that I could. And I'm very proud of all of that. So in the end, I feel like I made some decisions that probably didn't serve the company, but I realized it was time for me to get out. So we sold parts of the business off. My wife remained producing small ranges for spas in Australia. But it was time for me to get out. And as I did, a friend of mine who I went to university rather, had an events business, and they had just won the tender for the Commonwealth Games Athletes Village. So
Right.
The tender for a very small company was quite a remarkable achievement. And the tender was to produce 26 days of entertainment for the athletes at the village here in Melbourne. And it was to produce a pop-up bar each night, run a stage every day with multicultural and local acts, roving performers. And he said to me, look, you're not working. Are you interested in project managing this? And I went, yeah, sure. Why not? Like, how hard could it be?
Long festival, it sounds like.
It is a month-long festival.
Yeah, the amount of entertainment and stuff going on. That's a huge undertaking.
It was. I think in some ways I didn't think too much about it. If I really did, I probably would have said no.
Yeah.
But I had just run my own business, so I was used to dealing with teams. I was used to leading people, but I was also very collaborative in my approach to leadership. I'm very much one that wants to lead from behind rather than be the leader. So I found the approach to this project quite easy. And the people that I was dealing with, the entertainers, and this is where my love of entertainers came in. And for the next 10 years, that's what I focused on, was working with entertainers and talent and musicians and creatives. I just absolutely adored what they did. I absolutely adored their ability to get up every day and do the thing that they were passionate about, and just to watch them. I just gave them the context in which to perform. I just made sure that the stage was there, AV was there, the run sheets and rosters. The rest was them creating the magic in the interaction with the audience and the guests and, the athletes. That's what they did. And I absolutely fell in love with them. I fell in love with just that passion. So that's how I got into events. So from there, I was only supposed to stay there for a little while. 14 years later, I left last year after 14 years, but for a large part of that, I was a booking agent for large corporate events, gala dinners, public family days, festivals, things like that. So it was a fun time working in the industry and in that agency in particular. I'm still in the industry. So that's sort of how I really landed into the events space.
Cool. Great.
Yeah.
On the topic of events, as I was thinking about talking to you, I realized something very fundamental and basic, which was when I, as a musician, put on a gig, that's an event, right?
It is.
And when an artist has an exhibition, that's an event. But we don't think about it in those terms. We just think there's a gig on, I've got to do this stuff. But it's rarely a very intentional thing. Like, here's what I want the event to be. This is what I want the outcomes to be. This is how many people I want to come, or whatever. And when I did my album launch in February, I was very intentional about that because it was like a really big kind of milestone event, I suppose. So how do you approach like the ground, like either the, like the values or the ultimate outcome of an event? How do you start thinking about it? So if you were to, in the framework of a gig, just a musician is putting on a gig or an exhibition, how would you encourage them to think about it?
That's a really good question. And before I answer that, I'm going to preface it by something that I think people should really understand, especially musicians and the listeners of this podcast. When the 13th of March hit and we had started to cancel the large public events here, and COVID was serious, and we saw things like the Melbourne Comedy Festival be cancelled, Grand Prix be cancelled, and then museums started to close, and then all the venues started to close. It was really apparent to me, and I really hope it's apparent to everyone else, the importance that the arts has in our life. Everything is an event. We gather together for an event. Even a party at home is an event. And I think that then I really realized myself just how significant events are in our lives, in the way that we interact with one another. So when that happened, I think maybe a lot of us just realized, wow, this is quite serious, but how important it is as part of our life, but how insignificant we give importance to it. And that sort of really struck home for me. So to answer the question, how would I have entertainers look at an event? The same way that I need to look at an event. When a client comes to me and they say, we want to put on an event, the primary focus is to understand why you're even doing it. And once you understand why you're doing it, it's not, let's just take a musician like yourself. You're going into a bar, you've got a gig, and you're going to play for a few hours. That's what you've been contracted to do. Now, you can go in there and you can sit there on your stool and you can play your music and you can really hope that people are going to pay attention to you. The reality is, unless they're fans and your friends and your mum and dad are down there, there's chances are they're not. Your background music, you're a soundtrack to their evening. But when I put on an event, the one thing I do is I try to understand what's the guest's experience. And I look from their point of view. How are we going to create an experience for them in this space? And I think that as a musician, it's really important that musicians understand what it is that they're providing. See, rather than making it just about themselves, how do they fit within this context? And once I understand how they fit within this context, then they understand their value. And when they understand their value, then they're able then to produce something that's a bit more memorable. And they're not just sitting there in the corner wishing something else would happen. They're actually a little bit more involved in the outcome that they want. And I think that's where I found, when I dealt with a lot of entertainers and musicians in my time, they only saw themselves from the lens of their craft. That was it. But not how that craft plays in the bigger picture of things, how we interact with it as punters, guests, and then an audience. Does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, definitely. It's great. It's a total 180 shift of perspective, really. Like, I know, when I'm planning an event, most of the time, I'm coming from my perspective of what songs do I want to play? What, how do I want to look?
Yes.
And what type of event, I suppose this can be flipped as well, but what kind of event would I want to probably show up to? But rarely have I really come from the other perspective of like, why are people coming here? What are they going to get out of it? How do I make that happen? That's great advice. Yeah.
I think that if you are putting on your own concert, it's your event, there's a difference that happens. And I'll give you an example. When I book, say, for instance, a comedian, for instance, for an event, A client will say, I want a comedian. I'm not a huge fan of doing that because I think comedy is so subjective. It's either going to be hit or miss. But let's say that I agree to booking in a comedian for them. There's a big difference when a comedian performs at a ticketed event that's of their own show, or whether they go into an event like, say, a charity ball and they do a 20-minute spot. The main difference is when they do a ticketed event, every single person that's bought a ticket loves that artist. They've made the effort to spend their money, buy that ticket, get down to the venue and sit down there and be consumed by the comedy that they're going to impart on that night. And they're going to want to be as engaged as possible. They're as warm as an audience can possibly be.
Yeah.
But when an artist like that then goes into an event like a charity ball where maybe they're not even known to be on the lineup that night, that room to them is cold. I didn't know you were going to be there. In fact, I'm probably not even a big fan of you either. So now I have to sit here and listen to you. So the room is very different and therefore their performance changes. They're not doing an hour set. They're only doing a 20-minute set. The reason being is it has to be punchy. It has to be the best material. It's got to make the best impression in the short amount of time. So the way they perform is now different to the way they perform for their own gig. So whilst I'm saying understand the guest experience, you really got to understand that if it's not your gig, I can see you've got a guess.
Yeah, that's fine. Gotta get that guy out of here.
As long as it's not if it's your own personal event, it's very different because you've got a very warm audience. But when you're in, say, a pub or a restaurant and you're playing in the corner, you got to understand it's a cold room that you're performing to.
Yeah, cool. That's another good distinction. It took me a while to figure that out. So the way that I approach that, and I know other friends of mine who have approached basically doing like, if they've done cover gigs or whatever, they're at the pub and they're playing cover gigs for 3 hours and they're getting paid. And that's one mode. That's the cold room mode. And then they've got their own shows that they then promote and it's ticketed and whatever. And so tell me what you think about this. This is how I've partitioned it in my mind. So when I go and do one of those gigs where I'm playing in a room for others or whatever, like a cold room, and just being paid a fee, I partition that in my mind because I think about the context and I actually do think about what the people are there for. And so for them, they're there to eat some pizza, drink some beer, and hang out with their friends. They didn't come to see me. And so my role is to create atmosphere, ambience, and some of those people will prick their ears up and they'll come and talk to me or whatever, but the vast majority won't. So I kind of separated myself a little bit from the reaction and just like, okay, this is my role and I'm going to do what I can to raise the atmosphere in here or whatever. But my expectation is not that I'm going to sell, 50 CDs today and make raving fans.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that?
I think it's exactly the way that you need to look at it. I think that, this, let's look at the practicalities of it, right? As a musician, you need to eat. There's sometimes it's like, someone who's employed full time in an office job. Are they going to love the job every day? They're not. Are there going to be days that are worse than others? Yes. But the job provides an income. The income provides shelter and food on the table and a means of living. So within that, as a musician, there are some gigs that you're doing purely just for the money. And there's some gigs that you're doing because of the love of it and that you're sharing that music with a group of people that absolutely are as passionate about it as you are. But does that mean that the way that you perform changes dramatically? I don't think it should be, because I think that you still need to honor the craft and the art that you're delivering. Art has a beauty embedded within it. There's an energy about art. And when you're delivering it, you need to still impart that beauty. It's almost like a love. You want to give it the best every single time you deliver it. And if you can do that with every song that you sing, every product that you make, every time you do whatever it is that you do, at least then the intention that goes out there is as pure as possible. And then you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know where that ripple effect's going to go. You never know when that person's going to go, you know what, I heard this guy was amazing. I want to go back and listen to him again, or I want to grab his CD, or I want to do this. But if you're sitting in the corner and you're kind of begrudging the fact that you have to play some cover songs because you need the money to pay rent, well, yeah, what you're going to produce is being pretty crap. Everyone's going to know that. They're going to see it on your face. They're going to feel the energy that you're projecting, and you're not doing yourself a favor. You'll probably not come back again. You know, the puncher or the venue manager is not going to employ you again, and most people are not going to enjoy your music. So it's important to understand that I'm doing this for this reason, but it still doesn't diminish the way that you deliver it. You shouldn't do that. That's my opinion.
Yeah, that's a beautiful punchline to it. That it can still have the integrity, the creative integrity to it. It's just a different context. It's framed slightly differently. Reminds me of a story that someone told me, Marty Brown, who's Claire Bowditch's husband. They were on tour with Leonard Cohen when he was around. And he said he went to watch the sound check just from side of stage. And Leonard Cohen, even in the sound check, gives everything. Like he's 100. He's not just going, yeah, the microphone's working. Okay, guys, let's do that. He does it in his performances. He goes down on his knees very often. He does this thing. He kind of hunches down. And in sound check, he's hitting the floor. You know, he's hitting the knees. So he's bringing everything all the time. So I suppose, yeah, that's how I would kind of relate that.
There's, I once heard it. I think it was with Marianne Williamson, and she referred to it as playing it deep, playing deep. And what she means by that is whether there's one person in the audience or 1,000 people in the audience, that person who's there by themselves and that room is empty does not deserve a lesser performance from you than the 1,000 people in there that stroke your ego more.
Yeah.
So you should show up every single time, just like the Leonard Cohen example. Show up every single time where there's one person in that room or 1,000 people in that room. They deserve that, but your art also deserves it. You shouldn't compromise it.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, and there's amazing things that come from that as well. A concert I did, one of the first tours I did with my band, the first time we went to Brisbane and no one knew of us. I think there were like 3-4 people there. And we just decided to give it all anyway. And it was, I'd say it's one of my best performances ever. It was like 3-5 people. But there was one person there, and this is always the story, you know, you just don't know who's in the room. So this one guy, he writes for a music magazine, and he reviewed that gig. He picked it as his best gig of the year, gave it a 5-star, you know, like thing. And then he ended up, you know, booking shows for us, and all sorts of amazing things came from that. And I could have very easily have been very like, whatever, let's just blow through them and get the hell out of here. So it does pay to play deep. I like that.
It does play deep. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Anything else you wanted to share on the event side of things?
Look, it's no different. I like we said, I think it's no different. Think about it. One of the things that I learned when I was studying marketing at university, my lecturer, there's very little that I remember from university, to be completely honest. But I do remember one subject. It was services marketing. And I remember the lecturer, and his name was Leon Zimmerman. That's how good it is. And that's the other thing, you know, when you have good teachers or mentors, you'll never forget their name because they have such an impact on your life. And he is one of them. And I remember the subject was services marketing, and we're learning how to plan the layout of a supermarket, how it's strategically created for you to walk the entire space of that supermarket, and how you have end aisles for impulse purchasing and so forth. But the message that he had was very clear. Walk in the shoes of your client. Now, in your case, walk in the shoes of your listeners, walk in the shoes of your fans, walk in the shoes of your audience. For me, it's walk in the shoes of the guests, of the client. Walk in their shoes to the entire experience that you're delivering and look for those touch points, the things that are going to make a difference, the things that they're going to remember. And if you do that with everything you do, even with this podcast, whether it's the next album that you deliver, the launch process, if you think about those, then you'll give the experience the best shot possible, and it will have more meaning for those people. So that's the thing that I learned like 25 years ago, and the thing that I still apply to every single time I create an event. Yeah,
right. Great. That's great. Yeah, I'm already seeing, all the places I've gone wrong. So I think that makes it mind-blowing advice, because it's like, I definitely could have done that so different. Yeah, cool. Great. That's really valuable. Thanks. Okay, cool. So the other thing I wanted to chat to you about was sort of how we met, our journey of how we met, and the world of personal development. So when I was mentioning to you that when I mention the word personal development, people glaze over, or they get, I don't know, they just have some type of association to it. And so I think part of what I'm aiming to do with this podcast is to demystify and destigmatize a couple of things that I think people, and the reason I want to do it is because I feel like people really miss out on amazing opportunities to grow and develop and actually achieve the things they most desire in their life, the outcomes they really care about. And one of them is just the idea of personal development. But I wanted to ask you if you have different phrases or different words. So I like evolution, personal evolution. Personal growth still has a bit of a tinge to it. But yeah, how do you think about it? What's your experience? Well, can we step back a bit? So
go for it.
We should tell the story of how we met. So yeah, we met in Malaysia at a 5-day enlightened warrior boot camp kind of thing.
Yeah.
Warrior training. And it was absolutely phenomenal. And you were one of the very first people I met. I think we met on the first day and we just started chatting, and got a very good, vibe from you straight away. And I'm not even sure if I knew you were doing music, event management stuff or whatever, or in the creative space. And those 5 days actually radically transformed me and how I think about things. And every day I still actually think about the principles of those 5 days and all the things we learned and some of the crazy stuff we did. But it was extremely transformative in quite a short period of time. What are your recollections of it?
I look fondly on those 5 days. I mean, it was part of a larger program, as you know, of a year of different smaller modules or personal development courses that we did. And this is sort of the culmination of it, where really we brought everything together and we did this sort of 5-day boot camp. I have to be completely honest, I had never done anything like this before in my life. And I remember when I signed up to it, I was at a point in my life where I realized that I needed to do something else. The things that were going on in my life were just not serving me anymore. I felt kind of stuck. I felt like I needed a challenge in my life just to find out who the hell I really was. Not this idea of who I thought I was, but what have I really got to offer, and how brave could I be? And I knew when I got up and I signed, the document and said, yes, I'm going to do this. I'm going to commit a ridiculous amount of money for a year, which I've never would have spent on myself in a heartbeat. But I got sold on the whole idea of it. And, if I could just forget everything else that I learned other than those 5 days, it was still worth it. And in those 5 days, I pushed myself to the limit that I had not normally pushed myself to. On those exercises, I really wanted to quit sometimes. I was frightened sometimes. But then sometimes I was also surprised at my resilience and my capacity to keep pushing through, and my ability to find the courage that I needed, And then I was surprised at times when I was helping others to come through a challenge. And then the same thing would happen with me. When the strangers, a stranger would come up to me that I don't know and then would help me through a challenge. It was the most transformative 5 days I think I've had in my life. And that's how I remember fondly of it. And to me, whilst it was quite condensed and, it was very well planned, curated, all of those things. And then life's really not like that. It was kind of like taking 10 years of your life and squash it into 5 days and going, okay, let's get through as much shit as possible. And it was like that.
Yeah, very intensive.
It was very intense. I still look back and I think it was fantastic. It was really fantastic. So to come back to your question, what do I think about personal development? I think unfortunately, like many things in life, marketing has destroyed the concept of personal development. What we see is too much American version of personal development. It's that Tony Robbins kind of feel, the Harveka that we did. It's quite multi-level marketing kind of feel. That's what personal development's about. And there is a place for it. And I think that you should experience it. But I think that to think that personal development isn't relevant to you is kind to ignore what life is really all about. That's what we're doing. Every single day, you're making choices that are either moving you forward in life or they're moving you backwards in life. And if you're going to keep going backwards, then there'll be no growth in your life. You will continue to repeat the same patterns of behavior that lead you nowhere. You tend to blame everyone in life for the situations and the outcomes that you have. But when you move forward, you're facing a growth opportunity. When you do something that you didn't do the day before that moves you forward, or you take a chance on yourself, or you're courageous at a time when you didn't think you could be courageous, when you make a decision that you go left instead of right, those are growth opportunities. That's what you're doing every single day when you're moving forward. So whilst the term personal development seems like it's something that you either do or don't do, or you subscribe to or don't subscribe to, you're kidding yourself that it's not happening every day. So I feel like give it whatever name you want to call it, but you're either moving forward or backwards in life. It's your choice.
Yeah. Beautifully put. Yeah. You're either actively engaged in it or it's happening to you, or
That's it.
It's happening unconsciously. You're getting the results unconsciously, or you're proactively saying, well, these are the things I'm going to pursue and I've got to move these blocks out of the way to continue. I really loved what you were saying about the idea of capacity, that what it does to you is it continues to reveal to you your own capacity to do more and to help more, and to speak up, or to do things you think you're unable to do or you're not allowed to do for whatever limiting belief. But so it's really powerful. That's awesome. Beautifully said. So that brings us into what you've been working on over the last couple of years, which is more of the values-based coaching. So coaching is another area that has this, well, not so much coaching, but kind of coaching and mentoring. Is not that it has the stigma, but it's very misunderstood or not understood at all. It's not part of our culture very much, like it was in days of old, where people served under a master and had apprenticeships and had a mentor and were guided through things. Now, I suppose people, I don't know, they choose to go to university and learn a skill and go off and do it or whatever. But maybe we won't dive into that one today. We'll leave that for part 2.
Sure.
But yeah, I'd love to hear the idea of values coaching, the core of it, and your approach to it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, a couple of years ago, I'm 49 now. So, I'm sort of coming to a stage in my life where I've had great success in my life. I've had some great failures in my life, and I have really just started to look at the things that really matter to me more. And, I'm happily married. I don't have children. I have more time than, say, people of my peers. So I really started to have a look at things that mattered to me and sort of trying to get that full expression of who I am as a person, not defined by what I do, but who I am. And that's a big question to ask yourself. You know, for a long time, I was defined by my job title, the things I did, you know, success or no success that I would have, how financial I was, you know, those things mattered to me. And, you know, I can say that honestly, I'm not proud of it, but it's just what I was used to. And I felt that that really mattered. But at this stage in my life, I see that that doesn't really matter too much at all. What I really want to do is I really want to make my time here mean something. And mean something really just really for me. I don't really need to worry too much about a legacy of what I leave behind for others. But am I showing up in my fullest capacity or am I not? You know, how loving am I or am I still holding back? So I came across a great spiritual teacher about 2 years ago, and I did something that I had never done before, and that was I got a reading, and he's a medium, and his name's Ian Rogers, and I found for the first time in my life somebody had spoken the truth of who I really was. Didn't know me, knew nothing of me. But what came out of his mouth was just full of integrity and authenticity that I couldn't doubt what he was saying about the choices I had made in my life, how I was playing small, how I didn't really have the love that I thought that I had as a child, and how that I had thrown myself into my work to compensate for the fact that we didn't have children. So, I mean, I'm revealing a lot because this is part of who I am, right? And this is what I got to hear back. And I just went, this is so true. So I was so taken back by this 1 hour reading that, you know, I got emotional. I realized just how I had been holding on to so much and I was so tired of holding on to it, this belief system. So that led me to study more. And like you said, as a mentor, I started to learn more from him. And then I started to understand more about values, which is really the most important thing in our life. And a range of values that really sort of sit underneath everything that we do, and sort of these spiritual values, you know, and these values included things like your degree of honesty, your degree of accountability, how judgmental you are, how much ego do you live with, how much do you believe that you're worth making choices that are right for you. You know, how willing are you to share your energy with others, or do you hold yourself back? You know, there's a whole lot there that I just started to fall in love with. So I started to train even further. I became a counselor, a spiritual counselor, which is essentially a counselor is someone who intervenes in your thought process to try and help you deal with challenges you're facing with. But it is underlined with this sort of new belief system of like, okay, let's have a look at where you're growing and you're failing or not developing in these sort of values. Because ultimately, our behaviors are underpinned by what we believe in life. We act based on our values. And most of the time, these values we've just adopted. We haven't consciously embraced and said, this is my value system. I, like you and many others, would have adopted those values from my parents, from what I saw and what I was taught, and then went through society, through school, and then maybe even through my peers. And as I got a little bit older, they defined what I should have believed in and what was important to them that I adopted, but it didn't serve me. It didn't serve me, those things. And as you get older, you realize that you're making decisions in your life based on a value system that's not yours. And this is what's really important. And this is where I started to, like the light bulbs moments started to come, just sort of pop everywhere. And I just realized this is how I've been operating. This is how we all operate. And I fell in love with it. And I started to study. And now I coach people on values using a program called Personal Harmony. And I also do spiritual counseling. And I have clients where we really start to unpack their life and understand how you got to be where you got to be and what it is that you're supposed to be doing in this life that's unique to you, and how your family and your upbringing defined who you were and how it's not serving you anymore. So that to me has been it's probably been the most fulfilling work I've ever done in my life, to see, to see that growth, to see that awareness happening in people and to watch them change. And it's really just really quite powerful stuff. It makes me feel very satisfied to know that I'm doing something that I feel is really worthwhile. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Once again, beautifully said. Cool. So, yeah, I mean, it goes so deep what you're talking about, and so fundamental. Is that one of the things that really drew you to it? It gets to the core, like our values really dictate our behaviors, and identity. I guess identity is the other sort of really core part of ourselves and our behavior. Is that involved in what you do as well, or how do they sort of interact?
Actually, identity is a huge part of that defines who we are, and unfortunately, a lot of us don't realize what our identity is. We get into our 20s and 30s, and our identity is really defined again by, what other people want of us. It takes a lot of courage to want to look at this. It does. Yeah. But I think that's what's really important. One of the things I really understood more than anything was that I always pegged my success and my worth based on what I saw around me. How do I measure up to you? How do I measure up to what my parents expected of me? How do I measure up to what society thinks, or what, my peers think? And then what we do is, and we just take those concerns and we take those, literally they're fears that we've established now, because I'm now looking outside to determine my worth. And when I do that, it often is quite negative, because it's a never-ending sort of pit of despair that you're always going into, because it's never going to be enough. And the reason why it's never going to be enough, because what you're trying to say is that and let's just take this to a more spiritual context, right? Let's just go even higher than our experience as humans, right? And if you believe in something higher like I do, call it whatever you want to call it, I don't really care, but to acknowledge that there's something bigger than us, which is what drives our spirit. I came here to do something that's very specific to me, like you. Now, whilst you may be expressing it like lots of other musicians, and on the surface it seems like you're all the same and now you're competing with one another, the way that you express yourself is still unique to you. So therefore, you can't technically then compare yourself to others, because the experience is completely different. It's only yours alone. So the only person you're really trying to prove yourself to is yourself. So what you really want to try and do is, am I doing the best every single day for myself? Am I living the best that I can? Am I making choices that serve me? Am I being as loving as possible each time that I have an opportunity to be loving and giving? Am I trying to be better than I was the day before? That's the only thing that really matters. And when you start to think it's only my expression that I have to get, that I have to improve every single day, then it is no longer relevant whether your success is different to mine. Not better, just different to mine. Because say maybe this time I'm here and this is it for me. This is it. I'm not supposed to be I don't know, pick whoever it is. Say for you, who's your favorite artist?
Of all time?
Of all time. I'm sure you got plenty.
Well, it'd be, Thelonious Monk, I have mentioned in the past.
There you go. Now, you could look at yourself and say, am I as good as him? Am I going to have the same career as him? But see, he's having a career that's specific to him. But to then peg yourself to it and to compare yourself to it it's just setting yourself up for fail. It's not your experience. Your experience is very different, and it will appear very different in this life. But how you play deep and how you show up every day is a measure that only you can determine that satisfies you. And all of this, I can guarantee you, when you're on the path, you will feel bloody good about it. It will feel good. Every decision you make will make you feel good. And when you don't feel good, that's where you need to start to pay attention. That's where your feelings matter. That will guide you like a compass. If you don't feel good, then there's something that you're not doing, or choices that you are making that are making you not feel good. And you got to look at those, not the external circumstances around you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Well, yeah, I agree 100%. This has definitely been sort of the journey of really trusting my music and just doing it, just following it, and detaching from the external expectation of others to need to like it or want it or anything, and dropping back into purpose, deeper purpose. Like, this is what I'm here to do. I'm not here to be Thelonious Monk. Love him. I'm not here to be him, not here to be that person. I'm here to be me. I'm here to offer the purest expression of who I am and what I have. That's my contribution, is to offer my lens to the world. And this is how I think about it with artists, is everyone has their contribution of offering a different lens, because everyone has a different perspective. Everyone has a different interpretation of the world. But the more lenses we can have, a fuller picture we can actually get of whatever reality might be. And it makes us all better. But we've all got our own little corner of the tapestry to work on. It's not like I'm working over here and like, oh, but I really want to be working on that square. It's like, no,
yes,
just got to work on my little area and be, or have some sense of certainty that that's what I'm here to do. I often use lots of nature examples, but one is like a bee is not flying around wishing it was a tree and being very envious of a tree. And it's like, oh, I wish I was a tree, but I'm not a tree. I'm just this stupid little thing flying around or whatever. But that bee is playing its own role. It has a purpose. And it's going to go and pollinate flowers without even knowing it's doing it. It's just going around to get food. Meanwhile, the whole world kind of lights up. So I often come back to that. If you're a tree, just be the best tree.
That's a wonderful analogy.
Yeah,
it really is. And I think this is where we get stuck, because we've got to understand that the media and popular, the popular narrative out there is so me focused. And when things are me focused, you separate yourself from the collective, because you want to be the best in something. You want to be seen as important as the person that people look up to. People only look up to people that they respect, because it's not what they say, it's who they are. It's what they do that earns them that kind of respect. But even then, that's not the purpose. And when we start to bring ourselves separate from the collective, that's when we get stuck and we realize that we can't exist separate from the collective. But if we want to play our part, we'll see how important our part is to that fabric that you're talking about, to that tapestry, which is us as society. We all have a role to play. But if it's ego that drives us to want to be better than others, and that's a dangerous place to be. And that's usually what causes most of the issues that we have in our life. If you look at those who are pretty successful in life, those who have really true integrity, that have worked hard to achieve what they've achieved. Now, whether it be great success or mediocre success, in whatever terms you have it, the one thing that they'll probably all have, and I'll probably say, is that they just wanted to do the best they could in whatever it was that they chose to do it in. Whatever that gift was that they did, that's what they wanted to do. They were driven by that, not by money, not by fame, not by fortune. They weren't the things that drove them. And so you can see that by doing that, that was their driving force. So it's when we want to see ourselves as separate from everything else, that's when we get ourselves into trouble.
Yep. Beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
So probably we'll probably start wrapping up, but there's so much more. I feel like we're just starting to get into the core of what we both are very interested in. So we'll definitely do a part 2. Yeah. So is there, from what we've been talking about, is there anything else you would want to impart for people, a bit of a takeaway that people can think about or consider, and then we can direct them to contact you?
Look, just so it's relevant to, the audience that you have, first of all, I want to say, everyone who decides that their art is important to them should be proud of that decision. There are so many people in life who choose to ignore the creative part of themselves. And if that creative part of themselves is an art like music or some sort of craft or whatever the case, or acting or writing or screenwriting, whatever the case may be very proud of that, because it takes courage to do that. Especially because we're usually conditioned and educated to not see value in that. Get a real job, do something, that, with more regular income and all of those things. You have to embrace the chaos of that. But I want to say, I see you guys, and I think you guys are amazing for doing that. So acknowledge that would be the first thing that I would say. And the next thing that I would say is to start to see yourselves and see worth in what you do. And until you see worth in what you do, then you won't attribute any value to it. And until you attribute the value, then you won't really have the success that you want, because you're going to be your own worst enemy. Because people only see value in something when that person is confident of what they're offering. And if you're not, that's really difficult for you to maintain your enthusiasm, your passion, your love for what you do. So see worth in what you do. And the stuff that you've been doing, Mijo, I've been following you on that, and the mindset stuff is all awesome. It's really good stuff. It's really important. So as a creative, see value in that. And then work together. Work together. Don't work against one another. Work together. You're far more powerful working together. And I think that what I've seen more than anything, especially with the whole COVID situation, the events industry alongside the arts industry and the music industry is quite decimated. And what is really obvious is that the lobbyists of industries like real estate and banking and all of these other large, construction, all managed to get some sort of handout from the government because of their power as a collective. And this industry needs that. You guys need to work together. You're stronger as one than you are as individuals. And I'm not saying that you should all unionize, but I'm just saying that you should be working together than rather apart. So hats off to you. See value in yourself and learn to work together and to lift each other up. If you can do that, then I think that you'll all be in a better position. That's kind of the advice that I would want people to leave with. Yeah.
Awesome. Great advice. And so where can people find you and get in touch with you if they want to learn about events, have some values realigned?
Yeah, definitely. Look, I've got my website, which is steveangel.com.au, which has all the counseling, the spiritual work, meditations. I also have some free meditations that people can use, and also the coaching on the values is all there. You'll find me on Instagram under Steve Angel X. That's my handle there, and you'll see some of the things that I do with events and just some random things that I do there. I'm also doing a podcast for the events industry myself, which has been great with a couple of colleagues, which is really cool. It's called Back to the Future of Events. The idea is really just try to bring people together and get them to deal with what the situation is, but to see hope in the future and we're just talking to really interesting people that have got, interesting ideas and how things can reboot after this. And I think there's a tendency to look at it as restarting again. I think we can't see it as restarting. I don't think we'll go back to where we were. It's just a new beginning. And I think we need to see it as a new beginning. It's going to adapt some parts of what it was like in the past, but there'll be new things. And I think, just to wrap it all up, that is the analogy of personal development, really, isn't it? It's like, here we are, new beginning. This worked. I'm going to keep that. And the stuff that didn't work, jettison off. That's no longer serving me. And that's how this industry is going to develop as well. So that's where they can find me. I'm more than open. I'd love to hear from anyone. If they ever want any advice about events or anything like that, or if they just want to say hi, more than happy to do that.
Cool. Yeah. Hit Steve up, get him into your life. It's one of the best things. When we were both living down the peninsula, catching up for coffees and things, it was always, very stimulating, like this conversation, which is why I wanted to chat to you, because we always go into really interesting corners. I love how your mind works. So thanks heaps for being here.
Oh, thank you, Mio. Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure.
Person soon.
See you soon, mate.
So thanks to Stephen for that great conversation. He's just great. He's just great. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, you can get in touch with Steve if you'd like to. Check out his podcast as well. There's links in the description below this video, wherever you're watching this or listening to this, you can check that out. And if you did like this episode, if you got something out of this, please hit the like button, share it with a friend, or post it on social media with your own insights, anything you got out of it. Rate it, do a review on iTunes. Appreciate all of those things. They really help the podcast to reach more music lovers and listeners. So thank you very much. If you'd like to get a free download of 3 of my songs, you can head to mijobiscan.com/free music. You can also get a signed limited edition CD sent to you anywhere in the world by going to mijobiscan.com/GMCD. You'll also get an instant download of the digital album as well as the booklet and artwork. So hope you'll check that out. Until the next episode, stay golden. Thanks for watching and listening, and I'll talk to you very soon. Bye.